And so that leads us to the categories. Okay, if that's all the dangers of what they're getting, where does that actually take place? Now, real quickly, I'll just say kind of the more common ones are computers, tablets, and phones. Now, the most dangerous, really what we're going to be talking about, is the phones because they're so common. They're in the hands of everybody. Now, let's just walk through some of the apps as we do this. The apps that some of your kids have, if you allow them to have them, okay, one is Snapchat. Now, as we walk through these, you can see these on your handout, the logo for the app, and if you want to write these things down, you can. Okay? Now, the dangers and the most common things that are seen on Snapchat is it's used for sexting, bullying, predators, inappropriate content, and there's a vanish mode for messaging. Now, here's the problem with Snapchat. Anyone can send a message to someone that they want, and it's completely and totally unfiltered. Now, here's what can happen. There we go. We're going to keep having tech issues, y'all. What can happen is when somebody sends something that may be offensive, they can report that. But the problem, it's already been sent. So a lot of teenagers and people will send inappropriate content, whether that's they're sexting one another, whether that's just really harassing things out there, they'll send that. And it's sent no matter what. Snapchat's not going to filter that until after the fact. That's how that kind of plays out. Now, the vanish mode for messaging is basically they can hide what they're messaging from you. They receive it, they see it, they respond to it, disappears. And you'll see there's the same thing on Instagram and a few other things. Now, what kids I think often forget here is the content doesn't vanish. Supposedly it's there for a couple seconds, then it disappears. They don't realize that Snapchat actually, in their kind of terms of agreement, they say that they're backed up for a certain period of time and that there are ways to retrieve data that has previously been deleted. Y'all know that old axiom that anything put online is not gone forever. That's true with everything, and the kids forget that. They can find them 10 years later, 20 years later, 40 years later. It's not gone. Now, I think it's just maybe a week ago, if that, Snapchat actually released some new parental controls. It's called Family Center. There's a few things you can do on there. You can link their Snapchat account with your Snapchat account, but you still can't see what they see. They can still kind of do a lot of what they want to do. It's very limited, and it's very new, basically like a week old, I said. Okay? So that's one, Snapchat. I don't have Snapchat. I will never download Snapchat. I will say that. So next one, I think was Instagram we got. Instagram, kind of the popular thing right now, and some of you parents may know this, kids like to create Finstas. Does anyone know what a Finsta is? They're looking at me like, what is that? So what they'll do after they have their own account, which you probably know about, okay? You look them up, you put their name in there, you'll find this account. But a Finsta is they'll create some pseudonym or another name similar to their name, or they'll put their name on there and put spam after it, and they'll lock that account, and that's how they start really interacting with a lot of their friends. It's a way they kind of get around their parents or whoever's watching them. So that's really popular. And the way you can check that is if you pull up the kid's phone and you go to where their profile is at the bottom right on Instagram. If you hold that down or double click that, it will go to their other page that they're logged into. Okay, so that's an encouragement for you guys if you're wondering there. Well, do they have a second one that we don't even know about? They also have the vanish mode for messaging. They can be really, really, really sneaky there. But the problems when it comes to Instagram aren't so much like they are for Snapchat. Snapchat's dangerous when it comes to, they may put a photo out there that may follow them around for 10, 20 years down the road. There's not so much dangers like that on Instagram. These are more psychological dangers, whereas they've proven the increased levels of anxiety and depression, body image concerns, and self-esteem issues in those that use this. Now, that doesn't happen to everyone, but it's a common thing. And that's just kind of what we see out of Instagram. Honestly, I think if you can navigate Instagram well, it's fine. And that's my opinion. Some may disagree with that, but that's where I'm at on that. And they kind of, just earlier this year, they now have parental controls as well. And I think that's also called Family Center. Another one that y'all has just skyrocketed in popularity in the last couple of years is TikTok. Now, TikTok isn't so much going to be sexually or graphically explicit, okay? They filter their content for the most part, but TikTok is a discipling platform, okay? People will hop on there and they'll watch tutorials for cooking, they'll watch tutorials for all kinds of things. How do I even mow? I mean, there's stuff on there that will blow your mind, like simple tutorials. But in that, this is like an influencer's paradise. And if you don't know what an influencer is, it's the term that's been coined for people that are really popular on social media for basically getting a lot of followers, putting their opinions out there, and all these people rally behind them and say, yeah, that's great. We want to do everything you say. And so there's so many influencers out there, and TikTok is a breeding ground for them. It's their home, along with YouTube, as we'll talk about. But as your kids hop on TikTok, they may follow some political ideologies, social ideologies, and other things that you don't want them going down. They'll follow these rabbit holes. And all of a sudden, a week or two later, after they're doing this for hours and hours and hours on end, they end up on this opposite end of the spectrum where you never wanted them to be and you hoped they would never be. And I think that's the greatest danger of TikTok. Really, it teaches them not how to think, but what to think. So that's that. I think TikTok can be great, but can also be very dangerous at the same time. And it's one of those I would watch closely if I were a parent with kids that have it. This one has been around for a while, the calculator app. There's a lot of these, okay? These are secret calculator apps. Some of y'all may have heard of them. Some of y'all, this may be completely new information, okay? It's a secret app for your kids to store content, photos, other files, anything. And the way that you can figure it out is you need to scroll through your kid's phone and see, do they have two calculator apps? Now this thing, okay, you open it up, it can function like a normal calculator. You want to go put 2 plus 2? It'll equal 4. You want to do 2 times 5? It'll equal 10. But when you put in the specific code, let's say 8495 and hit equal, all of a sudden it opens up this folder where your kids have put secret photos and secret files. And there are so many of these calculator apps out there. Kids are smart, y'all. But I think what's scary is the world's developing these apps for them too. There's so much of that out there. YouTube. If you would have asked me a year or two ago, like, is YouTube really dangerous? I would have said, no, not a big deal. But the longer I've worked with youth, I've been working with youth for nearly 8 years now. Back in like probably 2015-ish, YouTube was pretty popular, but they didn't spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours on end on YouTube. Now, we're at a point where I asked the teenagers, this was probably back at the beginning of COVID, I saw one of them, I said, hey man, what you been doing today? He said, man, I got on a YouTube binge and I've been on it for the last 3 hours. That was years ago. And now I hear the same thing from so many of these kids. Now YouTube, I would have told you, yeah, it's not sexually or graphically explicit, but the problem is it's also another breeding ground for influencers. It's their paradise. 57% of the kids fall asleep watching YouTube. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they sit there and they doze off while the video's going. It means it's the last thing that they do before they fall asleep. 57% of kids about 12 to 21 years old said that. And so you don't know exactly what they're watching. It could be they're watching some stupid cat videos. I mean, you hope so, right? But also they could be watching some influencer telling them to do things that you would hope they would never tell them to do. These influencers will tell them, hey, if you want to be bulimic, here's some ways you can do that without your parents knowing. And there's so many videos like that. How do I do this without my mom and dad knowing? How do I do this without my mom and dad knowing? That's one of the biggest things on YouTube right now. And that's what terrifies me about it. Now, I love YouTube for so many things. If I don't know how to do something, I need a tutorial. Where do I go? YouTube. I'm wanting to fix something on the car. Like, I remember I had to replace an alternator in my car probably 2 or 3 years ago, and I couldn't figure out how to get to it. You know, it's one of those cars where you wonder, why do the engineers do what they do? You had to take the whole engine apart to get to the alternator. What do I do? Go to YouTube and figure out how to do it. So much of that. Some other apps that they use, I'm not going to go deep into this, is one is there's a way, and you can Google this and see there's a way for your kids to make their apps invisible. So whereas you scroll through their phone and it just looks like a background, if you actually click on the background where it's blank, it'll open something up. Google that and look it up. There are ways for them to do that. There are password-protected apps where it just looks like some random app, but actually it takes a password to open it up, and unless you parents know the password, sorry about you, you can't get in there. So there's a lot of that. There are sneaky folders. I saw this long time ago. I don't know how often it's used now, but even when I was younger, we were told to do this kind of thing where, if you're scrolling through your kids' stuff and you want to find their folder where it's like social media, your kids have actually taught each other now to rename their folders where it's not something really that you want to open, where they'll rename their social media folder homework, where you're like, well, that's just homework. I'm not worried about that. And so they'll kind of throw you off their scent, throw you off their trail by doing that. So that's a really popular thing to do as well. Like I said, I don't know how popular it is anymore, but it was like 10 years ago. Here's another one that I think really catches a lot of people off guard. VPNs, virtual private networks. If you work a lot online, you definitely know what this is. When we were up in Pea Ridge, like in Walmart country, these were really popular because a lot of the Walmart people had to work remote, so every Walmart employee had to have a VPN that Walmart provided. So this virtual private network, basically how it functions is it locks your content, locks what you're doing so that way nobody else can access it. So let's say I tried to throw Maddie a tennis ball back there and I threw it to her. I mean, if you think of it like, we're playing keep away and somebody wants to jump in between and catch the ball, they've stolen the ball. And so when you're online, that's how that works. The internet, it's sending and receiving data. And what hackers can do is they can jump in between and retrieve that data. That's how they retrieve credit card numbers. That's how they retrieve passwords, things like that. So if you go to a coffee shop and you're on an unsecured or not password-protected Wi-Fi, that's how that works. But what a VPN does is if I still wanted to get the tennis ball to Maddie back there, it puts a steel tube around it so that way nobody can take it. And so VPNs are actually created for very, very good reasons. But as with so many things, people take something good and use it for bad, right? And here's where your genius kids have figured out, because they know technology, figured out how to get around it. Now, VPNs are often used to bypass locked internet in schools and other places so they can access whatever apps they want on the school internet or other things. I asked the teenagers about this at our previous church, and they said, yeah, we've done that before. I asked the parents about it. Oh, yeah, our kids have told us that they've done that. Wow. They'll also bypass your parental controls that you put on there using these VPNs. So this NordVPN, it's just one VPN app that's out there, but there's so many different brands, companies that do these things. But I think that's something to be completely and utterly aware of. Google that and see what a VPN, learn more about it. How do I parent through that a little bit more? Okay, we don't have time necessarily to cover all that right now. But all this kind of whittles down to the fact, what in the world do I do with all these things? There's a lot out there. It's terrifying. What do I do?